So this is 21:33 GMT. This is the edition timed at 21:35 GMT. That is part 2 of the Khudilar broadcast, Khudilar television channel broadcast on the internet only, not on satellite, not on terrestrial, and not on cable platforms. This is the broadcast that has the wide banner of Baby Angel Geronimo. Baby Angel Geronimo is the world's best witness, the bestest witness, and the most innocent baby angel, Geronimo. And we apply this particular statement as well as the content and the inherent message to cover all the commentary and reports, observations that we make about the behavior of individuals as well as groups of individuals employed in and posted in various parts of the executive of the United States United Kingdom as the state, locally, regionally, centrally, and of course, overall including the still current United Kingdom, Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and England. Cornwall has been completely used up and swallowed up by England, but we recognize Cornwall by mentioning that it is there on the list, although it hasn't got any infrastructure that is corresponding to the name Cornwall and its traditions, etc., etc. Now, baby angel Geronimo is the baby that came to the United Kingdom in good faith, in good health, in best health. He was born and raised lovingly by a woman called Leonie Walker in New Zealand, and she will forever miss baby angel Geronimo, and she will forever regret letting him go or allowing him to go to the UK. Baby angel Geronimo is a cuddly boy, very sociable, as Leonie Walker told the Times newspaper the beginning of August 2021. And by all accounts, baby angel Geronimo remains cuddly, loving, and very, very trusting. Baby angel Geronimo has been looked after by his mom in England, Helen MacDonald. And for 4 years, baby angel Geronimo has been the target or was the target of systematic, intentional, poisonous, criminally conceived, evil attacks on the character, on the health, and the integrity of the baby angel Geronimo. So that is the summary in very short terms, the briefest summary of injustice, briefest summary of depravity that is personified by Boris Johnson, personified by his so-called opposition, Keir Starmer, and all the other personifications of evil that include and are typified by the likes of Nigel Lyson's son, Dominic Lyson. Dominic Lyson has got several columns on the extremely irrational and cruel parts of the Fleet Street so-called media. So Dominic Lyson penned typically cruel and untruthful and corrupt lies against baby angel Geronimo. as did the midget, the so-called editor of Private Lies, Jan Pissoff. Now, Jan Pissoff is a depraved criminal who has been fleecing the public through the BBC by the pretext of doing the program called Have I Got News for You? For each episode of that confection, Jan Pissoff is paid £20,000, or at least he was being paid £20,000 at the time in the prices of the year in which that particular data was published or publicly accessible. It may be £21,000, it may be even more now. But essentially, whether it's £20,000 per episode, or £21,000 per episode, or £22,000 per episode, it is way too much. £22,000 is more than so many people really experiencing poverty in this country have in a whole year. And that includes the very hard physical and mental work that these people have to do in order to get that, even that sum of money. So, Jan Pissoff and Dominic Lyson were the two, but they were not the only ones. Even the Observer, the Guardianized Observer, which ran an apparently sympathetic piece about the baby Geronimo last year, actually neutralized its own impact by containing and including in that piece a meandering series of lies and untruths that effectively kind of repeated the substance of the lies by the depraved DEFRA. So there was no outlet in the British mainstream British media that told the truth about baby angel Geronimo, and has not told the truth about baby angel Geronimo. The few kind of reporters that came into contact with Helen Macdonald during June, July, August 2021, and did run some pieces, including the Scum of Rupert Murdoch, which carried the piece featuring Stanley Johnson making an alleged statement, allegedly in support of baby angel Geronimo. And despite all of that, appearance or apparent sympathetic piece for the innocent baby angel Geronimo, the liars prevailed, and Stanley Johnson, who is not known for his integrity, suddenly became very quiet, mysteriously, and he has never again spoken on the record about baby angel Geronimo or about the excesses and the untruths and the gross and grotesque program of cruelty conceived and confected by the depraved DEFRA. Depraved DEFRA is the brief name for the UK central government department for. Let's check again, because I don't want to give the description in any misleading way, even by unintentional rush. So DEFRA is the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. And it says that it has got the DEFRA It has got on the government.uk website. This is the list of the contents. Reading that list, nobody would believe that these are criminals engaged in depraved program of harming and doing damage to perfectly healthy animals and defaming them and distressing their beloved humans. The contents are that include animal health and welfare. Can you imagine? Not massacring, murdering, and plotting against animals. Then pet travel, environment, farming, and food. These criminals have repeatedly said that the reason why they attacked the baby angel Geronimo is because they want to make sure that farming was safe, the environment was safe, and the submission. Well, the formal submission they made to the three rubber stamping High Court judges was the submissions were identical. And the submissions were not really rigorously examined, rebutted, investigated, challenged, even by the so called licensed law traders that allegedly appeared to argue the case for baby angel Geronimo. Now that takes us back to the inherently corrupt and unjust and unfair court bureaucracy in Britain. And that actually exposes as a lie the pathetic boast that David Neuberger made via the Evening Standard on the 4th of July 2017. Martin Bentham, the bent one. Martin Bentham is the bent one because Bentham is a spy. Well, most Fleet Street kind of journals are spies, informants, and they are not independent, rigorous investigators at any time at all. But Martin Bentham is a particularly kind of aggravated spy. So his promotion of David Neuberger in July 2017 was particularly pointed, and it was linked to the line that had been promoted by David Lidington. Lidington was at the time the de facto deputy to Theresa May, who was in the post of Prime Minister. And although she had allegedly been an anti-Brexiteer at the so-called referendum in June 2016, when she became Prime Minister, Theresa May went out of her way to come across as a belligerent, aggressive, and totally kind of uncompromising holder of that post, who was determined to do down every single rational observation about Brexit lunacy. Just to get an idea of how Theresa May behaved in those days, look at Liz Truss. I mean, Liz Truss is crass, but she's defiant, despite the fact that she has been serially admitting, like bits and pieces of admissions, that she has made a mistake with the crazy Kwarteng. She is still remaining defiant, including causing the Murdoch scum to run the piece on its front page 2 days ago, that she is not for turning. The Liz Truss is not for turning. Now that is directly stolen phrase mouthed by Margaret Thatcher, but actually coined by somebody else. Contrary to the mythology created by the liars, Margaret Thatcher was not a very intelligent individual, nor is Liz Truss, nor is Theresa May, nor indeed is Boris Johnson. These are people carrying various kind of quantities of brains, not the full quantity of brains, and hardly contained in their brains any compassion, any respect for the idea of society. For example, when the fire was allowed to burn these people, massacre these people in June 2017, Theresa May failed to appear for ages. And I say that Theresa May and the rest of our cabal allowed the massacre to take place because that building was completely free from any other obstruction, aerial obstruction on any side. That means that special flights of helicopters, military aircraft carrying absolutely more than enough water to put out the fire, that could have been done, and it wasn't done. And the fact that this particular point has been made only by us and not even by the so called campaigners shows the type that we have been fighting against in Little England. And we have been fighting over the attacks on the character, on the innocence, on the health of baby angel Geronimo. Because those who have pretended to be friendly to baby angel Geronimo and have pretended to be experts in the details of the animal health and animal biology, none of them, not a single one of those so called experts, has taken a political stance against the depraved DEFRA or against the depraved Boris Johnson or against the depraved useless injustice Eustace or against the depraved so-called chief vet, the thief vet, Christine Middlemiss. Thief vet meaning that she has stolen the image, the stolen the otherwise kind of sellable image of an innocent, neutral, impartial, science-based expert. So she's thief vet. In common with the other thefts and other depravity, Christine Middlemiss has committed serial crimes and criminality by acting as a source of expert knowledge about what constitutes serious health risk and serious infections. Baby angel Geronimo never has had any infection or any illness. And as many as 3 judges, as I was saying about David Neuberger, as many as 3 of those separately sitting judges Each one of them lied. And each one of them lied on the cue, on the instruction, on the prodding, on the menu that was put before them to follow in the course of their bogus proceeding, sitting in judgment against baby angel Geronimo. These judges should be prosecuted. All three of them lied. And all three of them lied against the evidence that they were lying. They were relying on the lies, packs of lies produced before each of them at each of the sittings by the depraved DAFRA. At least that much was made clear to them by whoever appeared at these hearings, allegedly on behalf of baby angel Geronimo and his mom, Helen MacDonald. Now, Helen MacDonald is a woman that we don't know. We have never met, and we have not really communicated to her, and we don't intend to communicate to her. And I'll say why. Helen MacDonald, although has been described as a trained veterinary nurse herself, I don't think she is a politician, not in the sense of being able to work out how the political machinery and machinations operate. She is a woman who loves alpacas, and she loves the baby angel Geronimo, especially because of the targeting of him and her by the depraved DAFRA. And as we have been saying in the updates, Keir Starmer has endorsed the attacking narrative against baby angel Geronimo, as has this evil Wes Streeting, who is supposed to be the shadow health secretary now. Now, in the wake of the mini budget disaster committed by crazy Kwarteng and lying Liz Truss, the opinion pollsters went into frenzy, and they gave Keir Starmer almost the keys to number 10 Downing Street. Now, that appeared to be the case when they were giving Keir Starmer 33-point strong lead against the Conservatives. That may or may not happen. I say may not happen. It is quite possible, and we are not going into the details of why it is quite possible that the Conservative will stay in power, one way or the other, for much longer than may appear or may have appeared in the last 5 days. Whatever the prospect, if Wes Streeting gets to become a cabinet member, then he will behave as Dracula Duncan Smith. This boy is evil. Wes Streeting is an evil boy who lied about murdering or burning animals when he was at college as a kind of like showing off to his fellow murdering criminal undergraduates that he was capable of being as cruel as they or anybody. And Ian Duncan's, the Dracula Duncan Smith, when he was in post while Cameron was in number 10 Downing Street, when Dracula Duncan Smith was in post as the Secretary of State for the Department of Deprivation, that is D, Want, that is W, and Poverty Creation as P, that is DWP. The Department for Deprivation, Want, and Poverty Creation was the department that Dracula Duncan Smith was in charge of. And boy and girl, did Dracula Duncan Smith did he cause hardship and massacres, because hundreds of innocent, most vulnerable people that depended on the benefit money were subjected to what we have called on the evidence a program of forced suicide, because they were denied help and money when they needed the money and the help the most. And there was no alternative source of support for these people. As a result, and they were being emotionally and psychologically given the maximum pressure and desperation. The result was that many of those people committed suicide because they couldn't deal with the pressure and the hardship and aggravation that was coming from the DWP. So, what West Streeting will do will be the equivalent of what young Dracula Duncan Smith did to the vulnerable people. And because it's medical, health, and the operation of the department and its delivery of service includes a lot of leeways and a lot of options on the decision makers who can then put pressure on the patients. It is quite possible that a lot of people would be murdered under disguise. So, this is the kind of mentality that West Streeting has already shown. He showed that he could murder an animal. And the details I cannot describe because it's too gruesome. And in the media, in the obvious kind of quarters of media, the so-called independent members of parliament in the House of Commons, there is no sign, there is no evidence that any member of parliament or any member of the House of Peers or any member of the actual media editorial kind of side has bothered to take stock of the behavior of these people and audit the impact on innocent lives of the depraved and depravity that is practiced by the government and practiced by the ministers and practiced in the name of helping and delivering health and welfare and well-being. So it's a country. Britain is a country that is ruled by evil. As I have cited the Surah Al Isra. In short, God said to Satan that he would be able to have the option to delude some people who would believe him, follow him. But the majority of God fearing and God believing people would follow God. So what is happening in the kind of collections of people like the government in the UK, it appears that Satan has had disproportionate number of his deluded followers present in the government. That is why these are behaving in a deluded way. They have been deluded by Satan and they have departed from the duty to be compassionate, to be truthful, to be objective, to be fair. And they have mounted attacks after attacks after attacks on individuals and on groups of innocent individuals and people. And the series of attacks that they have carried out, vilifying the baby angel Geronimo, lying about the health of the most innocent and healthiest baby angel Geronimo. These are samples. When we say sample, we mean that extrapolating the behavior, applying to other cases the same type of mentality of the behavior of the depraved DEFRA, it is quite clear that the depraved DEFRA have targeted thousands of innocent targets, innocent animals, and have targeted thousands of owners of the innocent animals, and they have put them under severe distress, severe, indescribable distress. This is why, factually, it is accurate to say that the British government has been in the grip of evil, Satan, and there is no accountability. There is no option available to the agencies of fairness and justice to hold these criminals to account, hold these evil ones, evil perpetrators to account, and to stop them from carrying on their evil attacks on the innocents. Baby angel Geronimo is the most innocent. Baby angel Geronimo is the bestest in health and bestest baby angel Geronimo. We shall, of course, accordingly whenever due on the evidence, we shall be updating on this narrative and this factual commentary about and on behalf of baby angel Geronimo. This is the boy whose picture is there to the top. From the viewer's angle, it is top right of the screen. That is baby angel Geronimo. He was pictured in South Gloucestershire, his home with his mum, Helen MacDonald. The reason why we shall not be communicating with Helen MacDonald is because we believe that Helen MacDonald has been already the target of misinformation. We're not giving any more details, but we know that she has been the target of misinformation by any number of people that have approached her by wearing the tag that they are supporters of baby angel Geronimo and they are supporters of her in that campaign. But objectively analyzed, enough evidence points to the operation by too many agents of the depraved DEFRA who have approached Helen MacDonald. And those criminals have included actually certain racist morons that have also mentioned us to her. Now we challenge these criminals to come forward with the details. They will never be able to because they are liars and they're deluded by Satan. We love baby angel Geronimo and we love the truth and we love the joy and the innocence. And we send to Helen MacDonald all our sympathies, our solidarity. And we remember Leonie Walker, who misses baby angel Geronimo. And we send baby angel Geronimo any amount of love and support and solidarity. And we shall be continuing to do that until justice is done against the criminals that plotted and crafted against the baby angel Geronimo. Now, back to the events at Birmingham, where the crazy Kwarteng, one of the deluded ones, the current deluded ones, let's say, because the deluded ones being fronted by the congenital liar Johnson, the deluded ones now are being fronted in formal kind of attire, formal dress as government by this lunatic Liz Truss. Don't trust Truss. And the Conservative Party intellectually, in terms of competence and in terms of integrity, if they ever had any, is in total mess and disarray in Birmingham. Also evident in the fact that the traditional, long-standing organs supporting the Conservatives, like the Daily Mail, like this come in the kind of grotesque left over from the Canadian racist moron Beaverbrook, which is the Daily Express and Daily Sunday Express titles. These are desperately in disarray because the Daily Mail typically is blaming the society. The Daily Mail is typically blaming society for Kwarteng's craziness and Lizzie's lies and lying. Because Lizzie doesn't know what to do with the Kwarteng. The rumor she spread that they were closest to pals has backfired. I mean, we have gone as far as to say whether she has slept with him because he's a complete, absolute arsehole. And so is she. Their records are full of incidents of grotesque, shameless behavior. Now, the looks, various images that have been available through the media today during Monday, the 3rd of October 2022. And I say this as a very experienced photographer. The type of photography that I do is not normally done because I do strategic photographies. Now, all these pictures that have been floating on the internet, the majority of them suggest that the photographers have taken care to get the most expressive, most meaningful expressions in the face of the crazy Kwarteng. He's completely coming apart because his boasts, he has been boasting. I mean, in his speech, he's been boasting. But he cannot boast because he has no factual basis on which to found a single iota of boast. Because we are talking about, what we are talking about is, quote, responsible capitalism. Well, there is no such thing as responsible capitalism. But let us hasten to say that there is no responsible socialism either. Because the protagonists, the promoters of socialism, even going back to the 1917 so-called revolution in Russia, socialists, the proponents of socialism, I say, the claimants of socialism, essentially have failed to provide a kind of reliable template. Now, if that is the case, then the proponents of capitalism are 100 times worse. Because capitalism, in our definition, is the polite way of saying massacres and mass murderers are in power. What do? They behave like vultures. Well, they behave like mass murderers and then they behave like vultures coming to kind of feast on the corpses. Because these people who make investments in the market take extremely risky risks, if you like. Investments are always risky. And most investors are not able to take advantage of the manipulative kind of options that are made available by Ponzi operators. And so, therefore, the risks that the investors take have to be rewarded in a consistent way so that they can remain kind of optimally encouraged and confident to keep making investments. And that is a matter of having confidence in the quote market. It is that confidence that has been fucked up by this creep, crazy Kwarteng. It's the confidence. So no matter what kind of remedial measures and stunts the moron pretends to take, confidence has been broken for a very long time. It's not confidence that is going to be restored anytime soon, as they say. And if you look at as I say, as a photographer, if you look at the various images that are coming of Lee's lunatic truss, you will see that her face of confidence, kind of glow that was kind of added to her appearance, that glow has been disappearing. And she has been looking paler by the image. And she's been looking in a way that, unless this can be stopped, this trend can be stopped, her next fixed legacy image, let's say, will make her look like a ghost. That is what I'm looking at in terms of the photographic evidence. And I'm looking at the language, the linguistic evidence, the phrases. I mean, she obviously wanted to kind of put the crazy Kwarteng under the bus, because she went out of her way to say that the decision was made by the chancellor. She didn't even say quasi Kwarteng, her so-called best friend. Apparently, they're both born in the same year, the same age, etc., all that rubbish. Now, she put him under the bus, as one of the headlines put it, by saying that. And she did that intentionally. She did that in the knowledge that she was not going to get away if she associated herself with him and said that she actually made the decision, or they, two of them, jointly made the decision together. Apart from in addition to that, Kwarteng has been forced to admit, I mean, something very serious, quite apart from that seriousness of being deserted by Lizzie, kind of don't trust her. Kwarteng has admitted, or has been forced to admit, that he did attend a celebration event with hedge funders. Now, these are the worst of crooks in the kind of investment market. These are the ones. What is hedge fund? This is I speak as an economist. I speak as a trained economist and as well as a practically observant student of the economy and the collapse. These criminals, given this name hedge funders, that is not what they should be called. They are the ones who create crisis in the market. Say, for example, the crash, and they kind of bet and they buy the right side of the crashed commodities and they make big billions. That's what happened. So, by being cornered to admit that he did attend the celebration and the plot with the hedge funders, crazy Kwarteng has come apart completely. That he has been their stooge, far from the kind of quality of intellect coming from his alleged attendance at Harvard and Cambridge University and doing the PhD. And he did the PhD on the wrong side of economics, economic history. Fuck him. Economic history is not economic reality. Economic history is an interpretation. So, what did he learn? He didn't learn anything. For a start, for him to be caught this early, having such a close role as the stooge of the hedge funders, Kwarteng has shown that he has not learned any economic history. PhD in economic history. Fuck him. There is no such thing. Because only the real intellect deserved any acknowledgement. PhD is not that. PhD is a kind of badge for prostitution. All kinds of prostitutes go around and they pick things and they parasites and they collect enough rubbish to constitute a tomb that they claim is a tomb of knowledge. It is not. It never is, never could be. No real scientist, no real inventor, no real analyst, no real investigator did that job by doing what doing a PhD involves. Okay? No philosopher, no thinker. So to say in his biography, in his kind of in mitigation, as it were, that he has got all these kind of Eton College, Cambridge University, Harvard. What the fuck? Going to a college or a school means nothing. It depends on the individual and study and student and scholarship. These are not the same thing as a label as to Cambridge, Oxford, or whatever. When he was not, quote, the chancellor, I mean, he really loves these two words, chancellor. When he wasn't that, and he wasn't even on the front bench, but he was trying to get on the front bench, Crazy Kwarteng appeared on the circuit, the news media circuit. And about 7 out of 10 of his utterances came apart. He got it wrong 7 times out of 10, let's say, and I'm being generous. If we count the actual numbers rigorously, then we'll find that he got it wrong 9 out of 10 times. And the fact that Lizzie Truss had to make him the finance minister shows the desperate shortage of intellect among them, among the ones that are with her or have been with her. So the Conservatives, regardless of whether the particular disaster that they've been caught in will be sinking them. It doesn't matter whether they sink or they kind of survive this one, doesn't matter. Essentially, they haven't got any intellect. The necessary basic intellect to be able to comprehend, grasp the responsibility, and to deliver in a way that maintains the myth of competent conservatives. Now, the Times newspaper on Monday, today that is, the 3rd of May, sorry, 3rd of October 2022, has got both Sharps and the Gove. Sharps is the Grant Sharps and Gove is the Michael Gove. And they're saying the same thing, the same kind of type of criticism, condemnation of Truss and Kwarteng. And of course, the Daily Mirror, as I've said in part one, and the sister title published from Glasgow, the Glasgow Daily Record of today, they're using the same phrase. Truss is finished. But this is a kind of update of what the Times said and other newspapers said, that she will be out by Christmas. Now, still she managed to pose as if she is nearly smiling when the cameras were around. But that smile would disappear sooner than she thinks. Not because I'm saying it, but because the pressure of the reality, the pressure coming from the reality, the real weight of the marketeers, because they rob the society. The marketeers, the traders rob society. That's what they do. That is how the society has got permanent, society in capitalism has got a permanent, huge part of the population struggling in hunger, starvation, debt, and so on. And because there is no real relief, because they don't recognize society, they don't feel any obligation to help those who are in pain and in being deprived. So they created the deprivation, so they don't want to end the deprivation. And that is one of the essential requirements of capitalist society. You have to have desperate people, and the demand has to be desperate. I mean, even the collective behavior between the oil producer, Saudi Arabia, and Putin's Russia this week has shown that they're raising price in order to make up for the loss otherwise. And that is what capitalism does, raising prices, raising desperation, and raising the level of kind of receipt, level of gain, or level of a kind of delivery. In capitalism, there is no social welfare. In capitalism, there is no welfare benefit. In capitalism, there is no way that society's functions are recognized, which is why when Thatcher privatized Thatcher inaugurated the looting of social housing stock, the council housing, and introduced right to buy, she instantly created fake wealth on the part of the people who were tenants of a certain duration of council housing. And that set off new layers of demand and new layers of kind of wealth. And these are all false. I mean, for decades, the right to buy has been exacerbating, accelerating the loss of housing, social housing stock. And that has had corresponding equal, if not greater, numbers of people losing entitlements and access to socially provided housing. Housing crisis has been there for all the decades, but the housing crisis that Margaret Thatcher inaugurated has been getting worse by the day. Homelessness has been getting worse by the day. And the potential intellectual contribution by those people who are robbed of their social entitlement, social housing, that has been totally kind of denied. So, for example, if somebody hasn't got a home of their own, individual or as family, what do they do with their time? They can't do the things that they could do and should be able to do, and they could only do if they had the peace of mind and the peace of space and the access, freedom of space. No home, they're literally on the streets. So they can't contribute any ideas, any thoughts, any action. That's the kind of, what is it called? That is the brazen robbery of the intellect, of the mind, by the lack of housing. So lack of housing is not just lack of a space for sleeping. Lack of housing takes away your humanity, the best of your abilities to contribute as a full and aware and conscious part of society. This is what is happening. So when the various slogans are kind of routinely performed just before Christmas, and the advertisements are run by the likes of the homeless charities, shelter, and so on. What do? These people, the shelter, etc., don't really tell the truth. They don't talk about what I'm saying. They don't. Because if they did say the truth about what keeps increasing, perpetrating shortage of housing, they would have to say much more fundamental thing, which is to admit that although called citizens, most of the people, homeless people, are treated as not existing in society, not even existing as human beings. So when they say about diversity, this, that, and the other, about black people being included, that's a pack of lies. Because white people, the majority numerically in the demography, the majority of the people without homes in a total number are white people. And they don't count. It's not because black people are taking anything away from them. Black people are not. They could not. It is the white rulers, the councils, and the governments, and the companies that are taking the properties and the stock, housing stock from the white people. And then they're being pushed into destroying themselves, as I said about Ian Dracula Duncan Smith. Many of the people who suffer kind of mental depression and all the other attendant kind of mental illnesses, they do that because they have been robbed of home, a peaceful home, free to live in home housing, and they've been battered too often, and they've been made kind of to suffer loneliness, suffer lack of space, lack of access to proper housing and shelter. Those are the ones that suffer from these illnesses. These are not illnesses that people are born with. These are illnesses that are being imposed, foisted on the people by the white society or white people. So this is called the class struggle. That is rubbish. It's not class struggle at all. It's not class war. It is Satan's war on the targets. It doesn't matter whether they are of this class or that class. A class is created. Class is not inherited. And the class is not of class, but class is of a category of people that have been deprived of their basic abilities and capacities to resist attacks on their humanity. And in the political totality of society, or what is effectively society but not really society as it should be, the people are denied any organized ability to resist the robbers that loot their rights. So in local democracy, as we have been saying about the corrupt mayors in, say, Tower Hamlets, in Hackney, in Newham, in Lewisham, and now in Croydon, the lack of democracy, lack of accountability is not a slogan. It is bread and butter, literally. It is food being taken away from the table, shelter being destroyed, and people being thrown into the open air under the sky to suffer. So many people die in states of homelessness. Most of those who die are not drunks or alcoholics. These are hungry people, starving people, denied basic health. I mean, when the criminals of the Labour Party in control of Croydon Council for too long, they were exposed as looting Croydon Council systematically. Leaders, mate, and leading councillors, chief executive. When it was discovered over many years that Croydon was being, quote, controlled by a gang of criminals posing as Labour Party majority councillors, what do the Lib Dems do? Instead of holding the council crooks and criminals to account, the Lib Dems organize a petition for foisting an elected mayor. What on earth can an elected mayor solve? And what do? The quote, so-called long-suffering Croydon voters absolutely fucked up. They went for it and they elected an executive mayor. Fuck them. Now, Croydon is going to get even worse. Just as the other councils with the elected mayor, Foister and them, are going to get. In the case of Tower Hamlets, for example, where the morons in Fleet Street keep saying Lutfur Rahman's sensational return, he did no fucking thing like sensational. It was a creepy, corrupt election on the 5th of May 2022. And it was fucked up by the Labour Party more than anybody else. Because the Labour Party in Tower Hamlets and the Tower Hamlets Council centered Labour Party, fronted by the moron, the midget John Biggs. Shit. I mean, the Biggs was allowed. Biggs was allowed by the Labour Party in Tower Hamlets to mess things up. Well, Biggs didn't mess it up any more than Lutfur Rahman did. Let me hasten to say that. When I condemn John Biggs, I do not endorse anything to do with Lutfur Rahman, who is a liar and committed serial crimes. Biggs is his own idiot. Now, Biggs messed up because in the post of the mayor, he assumed that he was morally more powerful than the others, especially the councillors. And what did they do? The councillors went along with that. And they let Big live in that fantasy. So he got in first on the 11th of June, 2015. That was the day that the so-called election took place to replace Lutfur Rahman after Lutfur Rahman was ousted on the 23rd of April 2015 by Richard Morey, the election commissioner. As the decision was made by Richard Morey, that was the day, the only day of the whole proceeding that I actually went to the place called the Royal Courts of Justice in the Strand. Because I would be so outraged if I attended any more days. Because neither side deserves or deserved my support, strictly on the evidence. In any case, when Richard Morey did pronounce and declared that he was ousting Alibor Chaudhry and ousting Lutfur Rahman from the council, the statement made on their behalf, or at least on Lutfur Rahman's behalf, was made by Oliur Rahman, who was a quote councillor. And Oliur Rahman spoke very briefly. And you can imagine, outside the Royal Courts of Justice, at the entrance to the main entrance, if you like, there were enough members of the Fleet Street so-called media. And there was this midget Michael Crick. Now, unless you actually saw him, the television images of Michael Crick do not convey just how midgety he is. I said this for a reason. Because they go out of their way to enhance the image of the likes of Michael Crick. Because Crick he has had a career as an investigative journalist who has specialized in covering by-elections for television. Now, on that day, as I stood next to Michael Crick, I observed his various aspects. And I thought about the 40 years that I've been suffering him and his pronouncements. And I then found that some of the exaggerated statements that Michael Crick made in his dispatches on camera for television must have been intentionally added to the pieces in order to give him extra kind of impression that he was weightier than he was. And I think that there was this self awareness on his part, have always worked on his part, that he was a very tiny individual making grandiose claims about so many of the British career politicos. Now, on that day, I also attempted to have a reasonable conversation, like as you stand around waiting for the so called result. You try to talk to people you are nearest to, standing physically nearest to, which is what I attempted when I found myself standing not far from Michael Crick. Now, I don't know whether he had seen any images of me or whether he had been briefed by his handlers in the MI6 or whatever. But he took an instant decision to boycott me, not say anything, not say even hello. I don't know how I looked, but I didn't look any worse on that day than I normally do. But I decided that this was not a particularly enlightened individual, that he was not very social, not very courteous. And I shall come to that in a minute about his grandiose bid to embarrass Theresa May when she visited Africa. What I noticed Michael Crick do on that day after the Richard Morey announcement of the result of Morey's ruling, which was that Lutfur Rahman would be banned for 5 years from public office and Alibar Chaudhry would be ousted, etc., etc. Now, those who, and most people watching this, and most people in society and in the world would not know of what's his name? Mark Baines. Now, Mark Baines has recently died. Reportedly, he died at age 61. Now, Mark Baines was one of the two so-called local journalists that were invited by the racist Tower Hamlets councillor John Pierce. The Pierce is spelled in the same way as Andrew Pierce of the Daily Mail. Now, John Pierce was given the spot by the midget John Biggs to chair the equivalent of a transparency committee. Now, Biggs was, of course, acting hyperactively, if you like, to create the image that he was transparent, whereas Lutfur Rahman had not been transparent. So, Mark Baines and Ted Jury appeared as two of the, as they promoted, John Pierce promoted them, two of the very revered investigative journalists. Now, neither is worthy of that, but that is how they were presented. And while Ted Jury mumbled and fumbled and failed to deliver as per the script that he pretends to author in his blog, Mark Baines, whom I never had heard of until that moment, until that day, delivered a pathetic eulogy in tribute to the Tower Hamlets Council officers, employees. He praised them, the unknown ones, and he said that they were behaving very good, very well. Now, what that was intended to be kind of doing was to create a contrast with the just ended regime fronted by Luther Roman, who became notorious as the mayor who sat there in the council meetings and mouth, his lips were shut by himself. He would not speak. Now, Luther Roman was only born in the 1960s. I mean, by the 1960s, I had been a vigorous campaigner in every respect. So it took Luther Roman decades before he came to the point where he was selected by the handlers, is a spying term, handlers based at the London Muslim Center in Whitechapel, for them to nominate him as the courier of their propaganda or the program. As Andrew Gilligan claimed in his Dispatches program, he fronted, that is Gilligan, on Channel 4 television on the 1st of March 2010. So they were creating the impression, the Biggs and the Pierce and the Baines and the jury, that the John Biggs regime was ushering in the era of transparency, enlightenment, access to information about the creeps and crooks of the council, as compared to the secret world that was epitomized by Luther Roman. Even if Luther Roman opened his mouth, it is likely that 9 out of 10 times he would make a serious error. He's not enlightened, he's not well read, he's not well educated, and his cognitive faculties are faulty. As I said about the hustings in October 2010, where he completely messed up when asked a question by the Evening Standard's then so-called reporter, David Cohen. So Mark Baines and Ted Jory did a great disservice to the cause of transparency and access to the information about the goings on in the Tower Hamlets Council, with John Biggs in post as the mayor. Now, as for the people who appear to be Bangladeshis and appear to be still in one piece after the collapse of the fantasy of Luther Roman being the incumbent in the corrupt post of the corrupt mayor. Those who looked like Bangladeshis, those who looked like even Labour Party members of the Bangladeshi kind of part of the demography, they behaved on the occasion of the council meeting which took place after the meeting held at the Micro Business Center in the Greater X Street. about the racist murdering Shiblu Rahman. Now, the racist had murdered Shiblu Rahman about at least 15 years previously. Now, this murder became the topic of a news item published in the Independent on the online. And I suspect I know who engineered that particular publication. Because although the murderers and the killers of Shiblu Rahman had been, quote, prosecuted and dealt with more than 10 years ago, there had been nothing about him in the period that followed until the June 2016, when this meeting took place at the Micro Business Center. And who do you see in the meeting? I mean, it is grotesque. The main guest invited there was John Biggs. Now, John Biggs should not have been invited at all, let alone being invited as the main guest. And who invited him? None other than Abbas Elias Halal. The photographs that I have uncovered again from that meeting show that Abismal, the name that I gave him because of his role as a stooge for Crossrail Hole plotters, Abismal behaved abysmally in wrongly inviting John Biggs to come, and then John Biggs was given the spot to deliver the main speech of the event. Now that shows that even without Macaulay, these morons were already mentally completely supine and servile. Why were they supine and servile? I didn't make them supine and servile. And geographically, I come from the same kind of region. How is it that I'm so different from them? What is it that I ate? What is it that my mom raised me on? Probably my mother's teaching, my grandmother's teaching, and the legacy of my great-grandfather, the saint, the Vedshah. Whatever it is, I have always been very different from these morons. How is it that any of those morons thought that Biggs, who was the executive mayor in post, should be at all invited there? Because it was the council, Tower Hamlets Council, that had given the promotion and propaganda to one of Shiblu Rahman's convicted killers. He was not convicted of his murder, but he was convicted of Shiblu Rahman's killing. But as the actual death was both the murder and the killing, whether a particular perpetrator was convicted of a killing or a murder makes no difference. They took part in the same thing. And Biggs said that he was kind of aware of the concern about the appointment of this killer, and he would investigate as to how to prevent any such recruitment in the future. What the fuck? How would that make any difference? What was needed was for those who made the decisions to appoint him, the killer, and those who kind of kept him in post should have been taken the action then and there. That is to say, immediately. But they weren't acted on. So when the council meeting that took place shortly after that particular meeting at the Micro Business Center, when the council meeting was about to happen, a few days later, the Labour Party members who took part in the organizing of the Micro Business Center shebang, they were more busy. Just notice what I'm saying. They were more busy looking for ways to stop me presenting the petition to the full council that evening about this issue. Because what they were quite concerned about was that me presenting the petition would constitute undeniable set of demands, which neither the immediate bigs nor anybody else could answer. So overnight, the night before the actual meeting, they had the unpublicized consultation, and they agreed that instead of Muhammad Haq being allowed to present that petition, Biggs would say words to the effect that he would look into it. But even before that, one character called, how to kindly put his name on the record. This has been one of the kind of script writers for Abbas alias Halal. This is called Anis Rahman. Now, Anis Rahman has various styles to his glorified name. He calls himself Dr. Anis Rahman, this, that, and the other, Professor Anis, Advocate Anis. Now, whichever formulation you take, it has to be one of the most humorous experience of your day. So what did Dr. Anis or Anis, Advocate Anis, tell me hours before the meeting began? He said, Haq Bhai, Biggs has agreed our demand. Now this is a measure of the kind of absolute sheer record of these morons' attitude towards my action. It has been so for decades in Tower Hamlets. So that was a lie. Anis told a lie. Because Biggs did not accept our demands when he did speak. I go back to Nottingham. University of Nottingham, sometime in the 1980s, there was a repeat performance like what happened with the activists, the Black African and Asian so-called activists conference in Birmingham in 1981. This was repeated, in effect, at the University of Nottingham, where I was the keynote speaker. So my keynote speech was very effective, as often they are, and this one was as effective as it could be. It made them laugh and it made them recognize the message that I was giving. But what happened After the speech was this man from Wandsworth Council. I think he's dead now, Joe Abrams. Joe Abrams was a man from the one of the West Indian islands. And he had been a school teacher in Tower Hamlets for some years, during which he became a political kind of source of advice for one or two individuals in Tower Hamlets. I'm not naming them. So this Joe Abrams knew me in my capacity, not as part of the relationship he had with these others. And he said, Muhammad, why don't you stand for parliament from Tower Hamlets or something like that? And Joe Abrams, being very cheery looking, kind of went all cheerful and whatever. And he said, you can do it. And all these people, including the ones that he was advising over the previous years, he said they would support me. Little did he know that they would rather commit suicide than support me. They are absolutely in Siloti ward. These morons are completely burnt with jealousy. Although there was no reason for them to be jealous about my careerist ambition, because I never had any careerist ambition. I never needed to. But they are always forever scared as to where I would kind of stand against them or take some position that they would be denied. And Joe Abrams had no way of knowing that, despite the fact that he spent a lot of time in Tower Hamlets and he spent a lot of time advising one or two individuals locally in Tower Hamlets. So Joe Abrams said to me, why don't you become an MP? He didn't know that long before I came to the UK, I said no to parliamentary career. I said no to many offers to join the government of the day, whatever the government was, because I had been offered positions many times. And it remains the same reason. Why? Because if I become a member of parliament or become a member of the government or whatever, then I lose my moral independence because I have to make immoral compromises. That cannot be done. I would not do that. And I cannot do that. I will not do that. But unknown to them, these morons who are burnt with jealousy, they never believe that that is what I think. They think I'll stand and I'll rob them of their whatever. I would never. The only time I stood for election in the council was in 1990. But that was just to show an example of what happens. I stood there in order to campaign to defeat the Labour Party, although I had been a Labour Party member. This time, I was forced to prove what I had told Neil Kinnock that I would do. Because I had been nominated for council candidature at the 1990 election. And the creeps did the same thing. They conspired and they plotted and they somehow created a controversy about my nomination. So I wrote to Neil Kinnock, who was the leader at the time of the Labour Party. And Kinnock's response, whatever the form was not acceptable to me because it was completely in denial and shoddy and whatever. So I sent him a fax. 1990, remember, there was no internet. I sent Kinnock a fax saying that I should make it my task to defeat the Labour Party or see the Labour Party defeated at the election that they had conspired to stop me from standing in. And I did. So I created the second opportunity for what used to be called the Social Democrats, which is now the Lib Dems, to have another 4 years in control, so called, at the Town Council. I created that. And the Labour Party, many of the Labour Party, well, they know me because I'm the most effective campaigner. They said you should have let us get in. I said, how dare you? And Abismal, the Abbas Elias Halal, I stopped him becoming a candidate. I stopped him from becoming a candidate at the 2010 parliamentary election, thus allowing whoever stood to get in. And I had told Abismal that I would do that. I told him to cooperate with me in stopping Crossrail. And Abismal made the most stupid response. He said, Bhai Sahab, that is brother, it's party policy. Now, he had not been born politically or otherwise. When I first began to teach lessons to parties, whatever the party, as I said, I put paid to Zulfikar Bhutto in the 60s. There was no way Bhutto was going to succeed after I had met him. I publicly, completely took him apart. 9 questions. And Zulfikar Bhutto couldn't answer a single one of my questions. And then he surrendered and he disappeared. So what those criminals in the Labour Party or any of the other parties forget is that unlike all of them, I don't do politics. I do campaigns and I do ethical, moral campaign. It's not a slogan for me. It is the absolute truth. When I predicted that the Labour Party black section would appear to be a disaster, the supporters of the Labour Party black section, including Mark Wadsheet or Wadsworth, was a fake. Wadsheet said that I was wrong. Now, Wadsheet is now in the shit house politically because he was originally, when he was employed by the BBC, he was openly a right-winger, and at the BBC canteen one day, he was trying to mock me. That was to get across his image that he was a right-winger and he was right on, and that I was a communist. I never was a communist. I am not a communist. I am not a member of any of these ideologies. So when Mark Wadsheet did that, I knew that he was completely dishonest. And when he then aligned himself with Ken Livingstone, after Livingstone was ousted by Margaret Thatcher and the GLC was scrapped, Livingstone then confected this anti-racist alliance. And the anti-racist alliance had Mark Wadsheet and Kumar Morsheet and assorted other shits. as the vehicle on whose shoulders Ken Livingston Livingstone would kind of travel and his way quest for the position. That was to take another 8, 9 years before he became the mayor. Now, Wadsheet became embroiled in a row with Ken Livingston Livingstone. And there was no way that Wadsheet could win against Livingstone. Because Wadsheet, like the Silotes in Tower Hamlets, was absolutely burning with jealousy that instead of defeating Livingstone, he conspired repeatedly to frustrate my lines. That was absolutely suicidal politically. Wadsheet was not going to get Livingstone off the table, if it were. And so, therefore, the whole thing collapsed. Now, as it did not, as my involvement in that or any of the other things did not concern my having a career by doing whatever I was doing, I didn't suffer any political conflict or political loss. But what she did, because years later, Mark Wadsheet became embroiled with the Labour Party right wing over the question of the anti Semitism thing. Now, I don't know exactly what company Wadsheet kept over the anti Semitism thing. But essentially, his claim at the time that he was close to Corbyn and that Corbyn would support him, and that he, therefore, Wadsheet that is, would not be expelled by the Labour Party bureaucracy. It then transpired that Corbyn or Corbyn's camp denied whatever Wadsheet claimed about his relationship with Corbyn. And so, therefore, Wadsheet was kind of acted against by the Labour Party bureaucracy. Now, the whole anti Semitism thing, I say anti Semitism thing because the entirety of the Corbyn linked individuals and the whole topic of anti Semitism being applied against Labour Party members or any member of the political kind of groupings has been ignorantly devised and framed. No genuine Democrat, no genuine constitutionalist, no genuine objective observer could agree that a factual opinion or a factual statement constituted prejudice against a particular race or ethnicity. But even before that, Semites, who are the Semites? The Semites are not the Jews necessarily or the Jewish people. And there is a huge kind of archive, or there are huge archives of documentary materials and evidence showing that the Semites are not limited to the religious Jewish people, and so on. So instead of looking at the evidence, looking at the actual history, and demanding evidence, before they were convicted of being anti Semites, these targets of action over alleged anti Semitic utterances, they went along with the classifications and they accepted them. That then shows that they lacked the necessary intellect, and they still do. And the fact that Corbyn has been kind of definitively kind of labeled as an anti Semite shows, as I have said all along, Corbyn's own lack of intellect. So, therefore, these people saying that they are for the Palestinians, they don't have the capacity to even defend themselves, let alone defend the Palestinians. These people have not been able to defend the Palestinians, just as they have not been able to defend the African people, the South African people, against apartheid, because the apartheid, forces of apartheid, when it came to fighting them, the forces of apartheid were fought by black people, not by the white, patronizing, so called sloganeers based in the West. And other parts of Africa, Southern Africa, for example, in the case of Zimbabwe, the various factions that fought the racists of Ian Smith and others were black people, not the white ones that were issuing slogans from London or the UK or whatever. And it goes on like that. When the British were conspiring at various stages about the departure from the subcontinent that took place in August 1947, they were conspiring on the assumption that the white ones based in London, the UK, would still make the decisive kind of decisions that would really provide independence to the people of the subcontinent. Nothing could be further from the truth. The fact that Dyer and his massacre of the people in Amritsar are still not punished shows that the people in the subcontinent who were promised all kinds of justice after the British left have still remained in a state of indefinite wait for justice against the massacres by the imperialist British in the subcontinent. Massacres and rapes and all the other crimes. So this is coming to what? This is now 23 23:23 GMT on Monday, the 3rd of October, and into the British Standard Time, it is midnight 23 on Tuesday, the 4th of October 2022. And the length of time we have been broadcasting is just 10 minutes before 2 hours. It is 1 hour, 50 minutes. We shall be completing and continuing on all these themes and issues and updating on them in due course next time. So whoever watches this whenever must understand that we don't broadcast based on numbers. We broadcast simply for the record on the evidence, on the strength of the evidence, and the complete commitment to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. And we tell the truth and we get vindicated on every single issue. That is our standard.